Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We are here for another one of your questions about work. And for those of you who are here for the first time, I'm Roy. I'm a startup investor in the future of work. And what we have today is a special one because we've got two of our summer fellows with us. And so we're going to talk about early career choices in this context. And I'll just say, Alfred, who's a Morehouse grad, has been with us as part of the HBCU VC summer program that we've collaborated with for many years. Alex is an undergrad still at Yale, and he's studying computer science and economics. And so we'll talk a little bit more about both of them in the context of today's question. And so, Alex, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, definitely. So the question that we are answering today is, how do you know if a job is actually right for you? And I'll pass it to Alfred to tell you guys a little bit more.
Yeah, I think this question is really, really interesting to me because I'm someone who's can be really multifaceted. I have varying interests and everything like that, and they can often pull me in so many different directions. And I'm often struck at okay, how do I figure out from a career standpoint which way should I go? And it's always tough for me because I find myself bouncing around a lot, and I pose it to different people. So this topic, I feel is very I guess on the mark. It comes at a timely point, particularly in my life. And I'm just interested to hear what Alex and Roy have to say about it, because it's important.
Yeah, so I've faced this question a lot in a way, life as a VC is kind of like being a recruiter who happens to monetize by investing in startups. And so I love talking to folks about this question. And I'll name a few common errors that I see, but first I'll just do a general how to think about it, and then welcome any follow-up questions you guys have, and we can talk about the choice you've made for even just this summer. So the general way I think about it is people tend to do compare and contrast between the options they can think of. Well, I can either go and be an engineer at a startup, or I can go back to grad school, or I can pick your other thing, go to Wall Street. And by the way, let's just acknowledge, even just being able to ask yourself this question is an incredible position to be in. And I think that's the wrong way to think about it, because I think that those individual options, they're more like the answer than they are like the question, in the sense that, to me, the right way to think about it is, what do I hope to get out of whatever the thing is that I do next? And at the beginning of your career, that can be a real challenge. And Alfred, you identified some of the reasons why, because you have a wide range of interests. You don't really know some of what you want to get out of what's next. And so on some level, the early choices are often about, is this going to teach me the most about what I want to do next, help with my discovery? And then the question to me is, if you have a mentality about what you want next, how do you think about what you're solving for? Meaning, if I had two choices, how would I pick between them? And here, the math concept of an objective function, I think, is really useful. Is what am I maximizing for, and what are my constraints? And that is true at any point in somebody's career. My constraints might be, I need to live within X miles of my parents because they're aging and I need to do something for them. I need to make a certain amount of money. But what I might be maximizing for is the quality of the people who I work with, ... And so one error I see people make is comparing the choices that are right in front of them. Another error I see people make is that they decide prematurely in their search process what is right for them, and they let that guide too much how much effort they put into different options. So, for example, people will apply to 3 or 4 jobs, and then they'll hear something that'll make them a little negative on one of the jobs. And then all of a sudden they will not put as much effort into pursuing that job. And that's fine if it's real data that actually changes your mind. But oftentimes it's well, sure, maybe that one person didn't like that one company, but you still want to go through the rest of the search process, the interview process, because that's how you get the data to figure out, does the job meet my objectives? So those are a few off the top of my head thoughts. I've written a little bit about them, and we can link in the comments to some of the stuff that I've written on this in the past. But I'm curious, how does that land with you guys in terms of the actual choices you found yourself making, including, we can even talk about this summer at the risk of you burning Bloomberg Beta's ears.
Yeah, Alex, you can go.
I can start. So I think I really resonate with the point about actually like trying to figure out what you want for yourself, right? What new skills you want to develop, and also sort of what different technologies you want to work with, for example. Um, I just got out of my sophomore year in college, and so this is sort of the time for me to be making those decisions, right? I have a lot of different interests. As I've been going through college, been developing a lot of new interests in different industries and different spaces, and sort of like a big question for me has been like, what pathway do I choose, right? And I think I really agree with your point, Roy, is that like it's not really about making it a choice, but finding a way to like find a workplace and like a job that sort of allows you to really develop in those different spaces. Um, and so, yeah, when I started at Bloomberg Beta, I really knew that this job was right for me because, um, I have a lot of interest in one, the economy and learning how different things in the world work, learning how different markets interact, um, and also, really getting to know a lot of new companies, and two, getting to work with really new technology. So, my background is more as like a software engineer, right? But this summer I got to work with a lot of AI agents, got to push the bounds of
Yeah.
technology. I actually wrote a blog post, which I can drop in the chat, I guess. But
Yeah, we'll put the link right here.
yeah, it's about AI agents interacting in a corporate structure. And I feel like this summer I really got to get a feel of like, combining those different interests that I had, which were talking to a lot of new companies and also working with new technology. And so, yeah, really resonate with those points.
Yeah, I mean, so I hear that goal about working with new technology, and I think being a software engineer is a particular kind of an occupation in the sense that oftentimes people have tremendous amount of work experience before they've entered the job world. In the sense that, unlike being a doctor, which you can't really do until you've like gone through medical school and done all this stuff, by the time you're a sophomore in college, you can actually have done a lot of quasi-professional or professional software engineering. And obviously we're investors in companies like Replit that help make that happen. And so the interesting thing to me is, if the goal is, it's not just how do I know if the job is right for me, it's also, once I arrive at that job, how do I take advantage of the opportunity in a way that extends my goals? So your goal was learning about new technology. There's kind of, I think, broadly two ways of doing that. One is, okay, somebody already knows about this and they're going to teach me. But with AI agents, that's less the case because everybody's still figuring it out. And so breaking new ground is a way to learn about the new technology. And so we've been really thrilled, with that work that you've done, where, just to restate it, breaking new ground in the sense of, you took this technology you cared about, AI agents, and you asked yourself the question of, if I took many of them and I changed the way they work with each other, and I took inspiration from the org charts of big tech companies, if they work with each other more like Apple or more like Google or more like Microsoft, whatever, would that change how they work together? And so that new work is really, it's profound. Alfred, how about you?
Yeah, I was just going to bring up 2 points actually. One point which was what Roy talked about, and it was on jobs and like job searching, and how you oftentimes throughout a job search, someone will get down on a job because they heard something about it or something was bad. And I will say that at times, particularly when I had just got out of college, I was guilty of that. I would hear about something, or my friend would tell me about something with a job, and like all of a sudden that excitement that I had for that job or the place that I was applying for would suddenly just dip a little bit. And that matters, especially throughout the interview process, because that energy that you're bringing to the interview might not be there anymore. So I would say that that's really important.
Good point. You can kind of tell when you no longer want it as much.
Exactly. But it's also important to, I guess, sort of stay the course and continue throughout the interview process in order to gain those data points that Roy talked about, so that and who knows, you might figure out throughout the process, okay, well, that's not entirely true, at least for this team, or at least for the people that I'm going to work with. So that was one point. Another point I wanted to bring up too as well is, and I'm sort of posing this second point to Alex and Roy, which is finding a job that plays to your strengths. And that's something that I learned about this year, actually, in working with Lori, who's my manager here at Bloomberg Beta. I'm someone who is, I like to interact with people. I like to learn new things about people. Someone will say, "Oh, where you from?" And they'll say, "Oh, Singapore." And I'll bring up something about Singapore, and then I'll start getting the ball rolling. I didn't really view that as like a strength, like I didn't have a CS. I didn't study CS. I don't have an engineering background. So I was just like, it's not a skill. But what I've learned in interacting with Lori and going to VC events and everything like that is a skill. Not everybody can interact with people and engage and connect with people on a genuine level. So from there, I started to figure out, okay, well, what jobs post this whole, fellowship and beyond will relate to this. And so what I'm posing to you guys is, what do you think is like something, what do you think of the idea of playing to your strength when looking for a job, not just on a technical level as well?
Yeah. So I think the key phrase here for me is timing and dosage, meaning there's a certain amount to which at any given point it makes sense to play to your strengths. And the same, by the way, is true of the data that you get along the way that might make you more or less enthusiastic about a job. The other thing that can happen is people decide that, like, this is my dream job, and they just fixate on it without really knowing enough about it. And so at the beginning of your career, I think it's important to do something where you feel confident enough that you can do a good job. We all have some imposter syndrome, so you don't have to feel fully confident, but confident enough without, the phrase that we use is over rotating. When you like take into account some data too much, you're at the beginning of your career. You don't really know what you're going to be really great at long term. You discover that. And so giving yourself a little bit of a chance to develop, like, for example, I never knew at the beginning of my career that I would enjoy entrepreneurship. I had no idea. And then I went and created some things and created a venture-backed company and ... And I only discovered that by doing things. And so, you have to allow for the possibility that you might be wrong. And one of the errors I see people making, which is not what you described, Alfred, is that they try to overly tidy their own story. They're like, well, what would make sense for me to do next? And it's like, I don't know. Yeah. Who cares? Like, the world, nobody's writing your biography. Only you are writing your biography. And so, like, if I look at my early career moves in retrospect, sure, that I've learned a lot of things from them. But as I was doing them, it felt like an agonizing random walk. I mean, I went from professional services to government to a big media company to starting my own company to being a VC. I mean, it's just like kind of all academia, nonprofit stuff in there. It's just kind of a little bit all over the place. And so I wouldn't worry too much about the sanctity of your own story, other than how you want to feel about yourself. But nobody else is like looking to see if it makes sense or not.
I guess you could say, like, on a spiritual and even connecting it to the VC in the VC world, is like your life is kind of like an MVP that you're iterating on.
That's right.
Like you just keep going and getting feedback from the world. And then that is informing sort of how you make your next move. But you shouldn't go out and just say, oh, this is what I want to do.
I think that's 100% right. In fact, Reid Hoffman has this book he wrote, I think, with Ben Casnocha, who's now a VC, I think it's called Startup of You, but it's about managing your career as if it was a startup. You can take all these analogies a little too far, but they also have real truth to them. And it's just worth paying attention to that truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the point about, people, I guess, like trying to craft like a specific like story for a job, or like going for jobs that are like considered like prestigious, is really interesting, because I actually see this a lot around me at school. There are like a lot of kids, a lot of my friends who go into like a job like investment banking, for example, that like is, that only like a certain like type of person would really enjoy doing, right? And like a lot of these kids end up like working in investment banking for 2 to 3 years and just hate their lives, right? So I guess, yeah, that point about, and a part of the investment banking recruiting process is actually like telling stories about yourself and, tailoring your whole personality to be like someone that like could work at a bank. And so, yeah, I just think it's like really interesting.
And I mean, look, a timing and dosage on that stuff too. Like, I'm going to say something very unpopular. It's okay to do something you hate if you know the reason why and you think it's worth it. Now, I think people in general should do things that they find fulfilling and enjoy, but there's also a difference between your first job that you're just trying and your life's calling. Like my life's calling was not to be a management consultant. I did not mostly enjoy it while I did it, but I learned a ton and I met a ton of great people. And I did it because it was a job that was available and I wanted to like live in New York and make enough money to be able to like pay rent. And so, you know, it's timing and dosage for that too. But I think the critical thing is awareness. Like it's also okay to say, I want a job that I can be proud of telling my friends that I have. And a major reason why sometimes people don't do entrepreneurship is that they feel like, well, it won't be prestigious enough. You know, that's changed over the years, but it can still be that way. And so, yeah, I guess I just feel like all those factors are valid. It's just about your awareness of them. And then the last thing I'll just say, and we got to wrap in a minute, but the last thing I'll just say that people tend to underweight is the role of luck.
Yeah.
Luck is probably more important than any factor in the decisions you make. And so being aware of that and staying open to it is just really important and powerful. And yeah, just curious if you guys have any parting thoughts before we wrap.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, when I look back, I mean, on my life, not that I lived like a long and like illustrious kind of thing, but when I look back on my life and even up until how I got to Bloomberg Beta, it's like, it was a lot of just being there at the right time, sometimes even missing opportunities that open doors for other opportunities. And it's just like, it's kind of crazy because like it all kind of works out in the end. So it's very interesting, but I agree, like being lucky and being very fortunate is definitely a part of life.
Yeah, I would just second that. I think like, you know, it's also like a competitive like job market like right now. I myself have been very fortunate to get the opportunity to work with the beta team. And so, yeah, I mean, yeah, you have to be lucky.
Well, I'll also just say we get, you know, to be very fortunate to have worked with both of you. And that's one of the reasons we have our fellowship is so we can expose ourselves to the more luck of working with good people. And I'll just say for folks who are looking at this for the first time, you know, we've got past episodes here at thisisnotadvice.org. You can go check it out there. And you'll see transcripts of some and recordings to basically all the rest. And yeah, thank you, Alfred and Alex. I can't believe summer's almost coming to an end, but we're really grateful to have gotten to work with both of you on your path. So to be continued.
Yeah, appreciate it.